What if you could hook people within the first 5 seconds just by using a couple of storytelling hacks? I spent years struggling with boring drafts until I discovered a few dangerously effective storytelling techniques that transformed my scripts into addictive page turners. So in this video, I'm going to show you 7 simple but powerful storytelling tricks that you can start using right now to hook your readers, elevate your writing, and make your script unforgettable. Let's start with technique number 1, and this is how to use it. Your story should work like a chain. Every scene, every line of dialogue, every single word should be essential to the story. You shouldn't be able to remove one word of your story without it completely ruining it. But here's the problem: too many stories have fluff. Extra scenes that add nothing to the plot. You know, they don't push the story forward or reveal anything new about the characters. And because of this, the story loses momentum and the audience just stops caring. So how do you guarantee that every moment matters? It's something I learned from the creators of South Park, a technique known as the but and therefore rule. Every single beat in your script should be linked by one of these 2 words. For instance, let's say your character is on a walk, but somebody with a gun stops him. Therefore, he screams out for help. Therefore, the criminal whacks him in the face with the gun. But your character realizes it's actually a toy gun. Therefore, he just punches the guy in the face. If you connect every single moment with but or therefore, you make sure that everything is either a conflict that complicates things, which is but, and a consequence that moves the story forward, or therefore. By the way, if you want help with every individual technique, I've made a PDF so that you can try them yourself. I'll put that link for you right below. But how do you know which scenes are actually important? Especially if you're writing a 100+ page screenplay or a 600-page book. That's where technique number 2 comes in. For a long time, I hesitated to do this. I thought it would make writing way too structured and formulaic. But when I actually tried it, it helped me see the bigger picture and just trim all the scenes that weren't pulling their weight. It's called the index card method, and here's how it works. First, read through your entire story passively. And as you're going through, write every single scene on an index card. Keep it to 1 or 2 sentences that just summarizes the key moments in each scene. If you can't even sum up why a scene matters, it's probably a sign that you should cut it. After you do this, lay out all the index cards in a table or on the floor, just so that you can see the entire story at once. Just ask yourself, can I remove any of these scenes without breaking the story? Once you're at the point where you just can't remove any scenes without damaging the entire story, that's when you can go and rewrite it while only focusing on these scenes. But what happens if you trim all the fluff and your story is too short? How do you expand it without just adding filler? This brings me to technique number 3. And it works like this. What would you say is the biggest difference between a short film and a feature-length feature? Feature film. Besides, obviously, the length. Many short films zero in on a single character and their personal journey. But in feature films, where does most of the conflict come from? Characters argue. They pursue love interests. They exploit one another. The more characters your protagonist interacts with, the more obstacles and layers you can add to the story. So if you want to create more conflict that actually propels your story, add some more characters. But be careful, because you can't just add characters randomly. Every new character should somehow impact your protagonist's goal, either by helping them or hurting them. So let's say your protagonist wants to be a movie star, and maybe right now your story purely focuses on the business side of the journey. You know, they have an agent who helps them land auditions, a manager who makes sure they don't do anything stupid, yet the story is only 70 pages long. Not only have you exhausted these characters as much as you can, but the character has done everything he needs to achieve his goal. The story feels done. So how are you supposed to expand something like that? Add characters who deepen the central conflict. Maybe his father constantly berates him for chasing an unrealistic dream, or there's a rival actor who competes for all the same roles. That's how you naturally expand your story, not by stretching it out, but by adding characters that directly stand between him and his goal. But how do you make sure the conflict you add actually enriches the story and that you're not just dragging it down? Technique 4 is perfect for this, and I had to learn it the hard way. If you don't have this, there's no way to know what belongs in your story and what doesn't. But when you can nail this, you'll have a North Star that guides every decision you make in your story. So in my earlier scripts, I kept getting the same feedback. There was no clear trajectory. You know, it just felt like random things happening to random people. And by the end, readers were just left wondering, what was the point of this? And why? because my script lacked focus. But how do you fix this? Think of some of the most famous movies. Like when you think of The Truman Show, the first thing that comes to mind is probably something along the lines of a man unknowingly raised inside a televised illusion questions his reality. But what does this have to do with fixing your script? Steven Spielberg once said, "If you can tell me your story in 25 words or less, I know it's going to be a great story." And that's the trick. If you want to clarify the focus of your story, boil the entire thing down to a single sentence. And then make sure every scene, every character, and every single subplot somehow aligns with this one idea. No matter where you are, you can tie every single scene back to those individual sentences. So if you want to do this in your own script, pinpoint your protagonist's core struggle and distill it into one sentence. Once you have that, use it as a filter. Cut anything in your script that doesn't connect back to this idea. This isn't easy to do on your own, so if you want my direct help in refining your stories with precision, click the link below to sign up for my free newsletter where I deliver tips like this every single week. But what if your story already has everything we've talked about? You know, your scenes have a purpose, your story has a clear focus, your protagonist is compelling, but it's just boring. There's no reason for anyone to keep turning the page because they don't really care what happens next. So how do you turn it into something so engaging that people just can't take their eyes off until they reach the end of your story? This brings us to technique number 5. One of the most powerful tools in storytelling. Let's look at one of the most famous movie openings of all time, Inception. Cobb watches up on a beach and he sees 2 kids and then he's dragged away to meet some old man. We have no context on any of this, but instantly we're wondering all these little things like, how do you end up on this beach? Who are those kids? Why does this random old man recognize him? And from the very first scene, we're hooked. This is a key element of any great story, but how do you do it yourself? Force the audience to lean in and search for the answers. If your character is secretly a murderer, don't just tell us. Show him being interrogated by the police. Have a gun stashed under his bed and make the audience wonder, is this guy a murderer or not? Like what? Quite simply, you have to get the audience to ask questions. It's like you're telling them there's a treasure, but they have to do some digging before they can actually find out what it is. This is the stuff that keeps them engaged. You have to make them desperate to find out what happens next. Psychological tricks alone are not enough to captivate an audience. If they don't care about your character, they won't care about what happens next. So how do you make them care? This brings us to technique number 6, and Uncut Gems portrays a great example of it. On paper, the story sounds pretty basic, a guy wants to win some sports bets, but in execution, it's a never-ending anxiety attack. He owes money to half the city, he's pissing off violent criminals, and he's destroying his own family. Every decision he makes puts him in more danger. It's a drama comedy movie about a guy trying to make money, but it feels like a thriller because it seems like his entire life depends on it, which I guess in a way it does. Something important to him always hangs in the balance, and this is exactly why you need stakes. But how do you make sure your own story is high stakes? At every moment, the audience should always be wondering, what happens to my protagonist if he fails? If the answer is not much, your stakes probably aren't high enough. Your character has to have something devastating to lose if they fail, and something incredible to gain if they succeed. Every single moment of your story should be reminding the audience of these stakes. Let's take a simple premise. A taxi driver needs to take a passenger to their destination. It's not very high stakes, but put a gun at the passenger's hand and have him aim it at the driver. Yeah, now it's high stakes. Now every second they haven't reached the destination is another second that could cost him his life. It doesn't literally have to be so life and death, but it has to feel that way to your character because that's the only way it's going to feel that way to the audience. Don't just have someone's wife threaten to divorce him. Have her threaten that she's going to take both his kids, all the money he's made, and throw him in jail. The greater the potential loss, the more your audience will want to know what happens next. And finally, if you want to know the most effective way to make your story impossible to put down, pay close attention to technique number 7. You know that feeling when you're watching a movie and you just know what's about to happen? You're positive who the killer is, or you can tell from the girlfriend's facial expression that she's cheating. And the whole time, you're just waiting for that big reveal, ready to feel like a genius when you're proven right. Finally, the reveal happens and you get that rush of dopamine that reinforces how invested you are just to find out that you're wrong. That's no accident. That's the writer making you jump to conclusions. Most writers focus on what they show the audience, but The real trick is to control what they think they know. See, it's not just about raising questions, it's about planting ideas, dropping just enough clues to make the audience believe they're figuring things out on their own. But how do you do this? The best way is to work backwards. Figure out what the truth is, then strategically place details that suggest an answer, just not the correct one. So, for instance, say you're writing about a seemingly perfect married couple, and Sarah and David are their names. It's never outright stated that David is having an affair, but the clues are there. A lipstick stain on a wine glass, a missed call from an unknown number, and a small hesitation in his voice when Sarah asks how his night was. These lead the audience to assume David is cheating, but when Sarah follows him one night, she learns the truth. He's not having an affair. He's working undercover for the FBI as a woman. Now, not only did you manipulate the audience into believing something false, but you also made them feel like they put the piece together just to pull the rug out from under them. The key is understanding how your audience thinks, what conclusions they'll jump to on the details you give them. And once you master that, you can lead them anywhere you want. Now that you know these techniques, how do you actually apply them to your own story? To make it simple, I've put together a free worksheet designed to guide you step by step through this entire process. This is a hands-on tool that will help you analyze your own story, strengthen your plot, and make every scene impossible to turn away from. So, if you want to take your storytelling to the next level, click the link in the description and grab your free copy right now.